Okay, welcome to PMF Connect, the first PMF Connect of this year. My name is Agnes from PMF, and together with my colleague Marina, who is also in the call, we are going to be your host today. And at any point during the session, if you have any questions, just write in the chat, and we're going to answer them, take them after the session. But before we get into the content why you came today, I'd like to say a few words about PMF for those who are joining for the first time. So PMF is an international community. We are all over the world. We have a couple of initiatives that we are running. Most probably, most of you know of us about because of the conferences. So once a year, we have a conference in Zurich. That's in autumn, in November-ish. And then once a year in Singapore for the APAC region. And then we also have the local PM nights all around the world in various cities, as well as the product exec circles, which are invitation-only events, basically for CPOs, head of products, VPs of product. And then we also have the trends and benchmark, which are basically, it's based on all the input from all of you. What are the trends? Where are we going with the whole profession of product management and related fields as well? And not last but not least is the INSEAD Product Management Executive Program that is together run with INSEAD. And we have a couple of times per year these programs. It's a full week program that is run either in San Francisco or in Fontainebleau in France. You can find more information about this on the pmep.education website. And this is also for heads of product, CPOs, and VPs of product. We can go to the next slide. Thank you, Marina. And then we are also preparing shortly for the conference, which is going to take place in November, 9 and 10 in November here in Zurich. And the early bird tickets now on sale until the end of March. And then you can see a lot of very interesting companies and much more. These are companies from last year on stage and in the participants as well. Okay. And today, we have three really great guys from Nexthink. Nexthink is a software company focused on helping IT to shape smart and productive workplace. And I'm especially excited to welcome Vlad, Guillaume, and Michael, because when I got to know them a bit, this is the perfect PM, tech, and design love triangle. There's always this tension between the three areas that I'm sure you have all noticed, but they are working so harmoniously. So I hope you will get the experience during their presentation. Just a few words about them. Guillaume is the product director at Nexthink. He's been there for 5 years and worked at the first cloud-native Nexthink product. He also works as a product manager for finance and quantitative marketing product teams. Michael is the lead product designer, responsible for the digital experience module. And before working at Nexthink, he worked as a UX consultant for various private and public entities in Switzerland, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And Vlad is the engineering manager of Nexthink, and he's passionate about new technologies. He's worked at CERN before and a startup before joining Nexthink. Fun fact, he used to work with Vlad and his wife together. Okay, so that's the introduction, and the stage is yours, guys. Take it away.
Thanks a lot, Agnes, and hello, everyone. So I'm Guillaume. I'm going to share my screen. So we're super happy to be here with you today, and we hope that what we're going to present will be useful for you, that you will learn some things today. So this is the agenda. We'll start with a few words about Nexthink, and then we'll deep dive into the main content of the presentation about building products during a transition to SaaS. We'll talk about what was our main challenge to build on moving ground. We'll see how we had to think bigger than just our product. We'll see how we had to manage complex scope negotiations and also stakeholders putting lots of pressure. And we'll see finally how the new cloud operations team that you might have if you're in the same situation than we were during this SaaS transition needs to be your best friend. So let's start a bit with Nexthink. So what does Nexthink do? So we are a software company and we are building a product which help IT teams find and fix IT issues faster for employees. So it helps to proactively manage and improve the employee digital experience and to provide the right technology and the right workplace to every employee. So it's a new market that we're creating, which is called digital employee experience, which is super important because basically our goal is really to delight people at work, make sure that our employees are as productive as possible and that they are not disturbed by all those IT issues that probably many of you are experiencing every day. So a bit about the company. Nexthink is a company which has been in a hyper growth mode for a few years now. We call it the rocket ship now. So just last year, we had 28% new growth in employees. So we hired almost 400 new Nexthinkers, and we still have more than 200 positions open across the world. And we've been elected as the best place to work very recently. And because our mission is to delight people at work, we also make sure that we delight our own employees and we put our people first. So we have a hybrid environment where lots of people can work both from home and from the office. We make sure that everyone can have an impact on the company. We have equity for all employees, a very flexible workplace and unlimited PTOs. Strong training programs, and we are very focused on corporate social responsibility, and we have lots of diversity programs. And once again, in case you haven't seen it, we're hiring. So you have our contacts at the end of this presentation. Don't hesitate to reach out or to directly apply on Nexthink's website. So now let's deep dive a bit into the topic of today. And let's start with a bit of context. So what was this transition to SaaS? So this transition to SaaS, as you can imagine, and Vlad will tell more details about this, was very important for us to remove lots of the limitations that we have with our on-prem product. But that was not the only thing which happened at that time when we started building our product with Michael and Vlad. So we had a change of cloud provider, which happened in the middle of the construction of this product and added a bit of complexity. We were moving to a new architecture. Vlad will also come back to this, but that's not it yet. We also had new teams. So all the teams were kind of reshuffled just before we started working on this. And the new product that we were building was also using a new technology to collect data. And as I've said before, so Nexthink's been in hypergrowth for quite some time now, and it was already the case. So all of this just to explain, why this was a very special situation and why we thought it deserved to have a dedicated presentation and provide some tips and tricks in case you end up in a similar situation. And let's start with the main challenge, which was to build on moving grounds. And for this, I give it to Vlad.
Thank you, Guillaume. So I'm just going to give you a bit of insight into what we went through. I joined Nexthink 2 years ago in 2020. And when I joined the company, we were in the process of transitioning from a monolithic architecture to a microservice one. So when I joined, I think 99% of the Nexthink customers were running monolithic software on-premise. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. It helped Nexthink grow, and it helped reach from like first customer in 2004, which by the way was Rolex, to around 1,000 customers in 2020. So having access to all of the technologies that Nexthink provided really brought a lot of value to the customers, and the fact that we were based on a monolithic architecture actually allowed us to push that. But in order to scale up and onboard even more customers, we needed to provide another solution in terms of scalability. And here, going to the cloud was the solution for us, and specifically going to a microservice architecture. Next slide. If you want to do that from the get-go, it's very difficult. So we went through a transitionary phase before, and we did what we called lift and shift. And we initially moved the monolithic software that we had into the cloud as is. So think a bit about it as creating a sort of a virtual machine for the on-premise software, and this allowed us to onboard a lot more customers. It had minor changes to the architecture, but more importantly, it actually allowed us to get used to the cloud technologies and getting a bit more confidence into this new approach. And while doing this, our team started working on a completely new product based on microservices that would be built on top of a new cloud native platform. So Guillaume, Michael, and myself were working with the first team to release a cloud native feature. And our needs also drove the requirements for the cloud native platform. It was a difficult road, but in around a year, we managed to have our first technical preview. And by the end of last year in October, we had our first GA. And at least from my side, I consider the product a success. And yes, it was a difficult road, but I think the result was worth it. And I think Guillaume will just try to explain a bit more what challenges we faced.
Thanks a lot, Vlad. So we hope that with this, you understand a bit more the context. And one of the consequences of having to build this new product on this new platform at the same time that the platform was being built is that it was quite a long takeoff. So at the beginning, it was a bit frustrating for me as a product manager. And I know also for Michael as a designer, because we had a ton of ideas. We were building lots of mockups. But in the end, there were not so many outputs, not really feature delivered, and especially not delivered to customers, because basically, as long as there was not a minimal platform which could support our product, it was just not possible to deliver it to anyone. So a bit of frustration, but it's normal. It takes time to develop a new product, and especially a new platform from scratch. So you have to accept it, and that's why I think here we learned some lessons that this time can be spent very well, even if you cannot really release like beta or GA features to customers. You can really spend a lot of time to build a compelling vision, to onboard many different stakeholders, the management, the customers, the engineers with this vision, and to refine it. You can experiment and discover. Of course, it's a great time for discovery. It's also very important to align and discuss with all the teams you have dependencies with, and especially the platform team in that case. And then so I recap below the kind of the 4 risks that you have to discover. At least that's how I would say Marty Kagan lists them. So the business value, viability, usability, and feasibility. And this is once again a great time to assess those risks, work on them, and make sure that once the engine is on and you start delivering, you're sure about what you're going to do. But that was not the only challenge. So that was the main one, but we had many others. So if you remember a bit the context at the beginning, I mentioned that we were working with new teams. So, when you've worked with the same team for a while, the team starts to be a bit predictable. They get on with each other. They know how to work together. We had to restart from scratch. And I mean, there was a great reason for which this happened. It's that we wanted to move away from a model that we call sometimes feature teams to a more empowered product teams model, where the teams are supposed to be more independent and they are able to take their own decisions and be accountable for them. So that's really great. Everybody was super excited about this. So the teams were empowered, but they had lots of dependencies. Once again, we had to build this new cloud platform. It was new for lots of people. So, the engineering organization needed a bit of time to adapt. And in that case, it resulted in many dependencies between different teams. As you can imagine, that's not super easy to manage. There's an overhead. There's a bit of project management to do, but once again, we learned some lessons here. For project dependencies, of course, it's on the product manager to manage them. But in our case, there was lots of engineering dependencies, especially, as we said, with the platform, but also other teams. And in that case, I would say as a product manager, it's very, very important that you rely on your engineering counterpart. So in my case, Vlad, to be able to manage these dependencies, because they're the best to understand, given the architecture, given where we're going, given the, the technical vision, how to manage those dependencies, which teams to contact, how to align with them. But of course, as a product manager, you can rely on your engineering counterpart, but you don't need to be completely passive. You can also give ideas and help and encourage also to manage these dependencies on the short term, but also to build a plan to reduce these dependencies on the long term. For instance, what happened is that our team took on some of the part of the code and the responsibilities that the platform team had, a small part, but an important one, which allowed us to be much more independent once we took this over. And here I put a hashtag to illustrate one of the core values of Nexthink. We have 4 of them, and this first one is we are one team. So in that case, I think it was super important that we work together with all the teams with which we had dependencies, but also between product and engineering to be able to overcome this challenge. Another challenge, I would say maybe that's a positive one, depends how you see it, but it was the fact that we were in hypergrowth. And here I think it's quite funny how it reflected. So when we started working on this product, so I was the product manager working with the engineers, and we had a designer who was assigned part-time just to work on this. In fact, we had only one designer for the whole company. Today, I think we have something like 10 or more. And so we ended up, when we released this product, to have still me as product manager and the engineers, of course, but we had a dedicated product designer, Michael. We had Vlad as engineering manager. We had someone working for product marketing, specifically on this product. We have a team of user researchers and some business experts who were not, of course, fully on this product, but who could be helpful and that were didn't exist when we started building the product. And I think here the lesson learned is that it's super important to understand who are these people, what they do, and leverage their skills. In my case, in the previous companies I had worked with, we didn't have most of these people, so I was not used to working with them. But I discovered that there were, of course, they had lots of skills that could be used and leveraged to build a great product. And that it's very important, in fact, to onboard them in your vision and to remain in the driver's seat. And I think they will be super impactful if you manage to convince them that your vision and your product is great, and that you take also their inputs into account. And in that case, I think there's a strong recipe for success because these people can really help you a lot. And here I put another one of the Nexthink core values, which is we keep growing because, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We grew as a company, we grew as an organization, but we also grew as individuals. And for myself, I learned to work with all these people, and that was really a great experience. So for the next challenge, think bigger than your product, I leave it to Michael.
Thank you, Guillaume, and hi, everybody. Yes, for this section, I'll talk about why it's important to think bigger than your product. In our particular case, our product application experience was just one module of the whole Nexthink product, among other 6 or 7 other modules. But as Guillaume and Vlad explained before, it was the first new module to be implemented on cloud. And knowing this, and knowing that all the 6 or 7 existing modules and the one to come in the future will have to follow us at some point on cloud, you cannot just build your own thing on a small corner of your desk. You really have to think broader than this. Being the first brings some responsibilities. You have to make sure that everything you're doing will be reusable and will work for the other product teams. This implies, of course, a lot of alignment meetings with different teams and profile. Next slide. Here are just a couple of examples of the things we were the first to define and implement. And the first one, super obvious for me as product designer, was everything related to user experience. So simple things as the navigation, so menus, submenus, and navigation architectures, how the filter should work, the kind of data visualization, and simple things as error messages or warning. We had to define that. Another interesting example here are the time frame and time zones management, because this was already implemented in a way in the on-prem product, but moving on cloud, we had more flexibility and more room for improvement for that. So we had to do that, but doing this, we also have to make sure that it's okay to manage time frame in a different way for the other modules. So for me, the lesson learned was moving from on-prem to cloud. This kind of migration is a good opportunity to improve your product. And those opportunities you have to take, but always try to keep in mind the customers. It's good to improve, but sometimes not only based on the technical capabilities, but also why not on new user research. And of course, you have to ensure a smooth transition for the existing user to the new platform. And once again, the time frame and time zone management is a good example here. And the other one, well, it's once again about UX and consistency, is clear the path for the other teams and make it as easy as possible for them to follow you when they need to. And the example here is try to build a design system. That's going to be super easy for them to follow here. And we attach to these two or three slides our core value, which is we get things done, because actually we did that from the beginning.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, it was quite overwhelming. So when you start working on a new product which is part of a bigger platform, we didn't expect that we would have kind of to reinvent the wheel for many of those things like time frame, time zone. And yes, when you realize this, you can be a bit overwhelmed, and that's why I think we thought that we get things done here is important, because despite this, we said, okay, we have to do it. It's important. Let's go. It's a bit beyond what we had in mind when we started, but we have to do it. So we did it. Switching to another challenge, scope negotiation. So I'm pretty sure that all of you there are very familiar with this. And it's probably something that you do almost on a daily basis. So especially as a product manager working with engineers, you start with a nice scope, specifications, designs, and so on. And then the team starts writing the first lines of code, and we cannot do this. This one is more complex than what we expected. Oh, maybe for this one, we can do a bit more differently. And you have to negotiate the scope and change the scope and so on and so forth. So I would say that that's very classic. But why we wanted to discuss about this today is because in that specific case, the scope negotiation was kind of squared, if I may say, because we also had to do it with the platform team that was building the platform on which we were building our own product. And we had even other teams. So just to mention another example, but there were even others. So we had a team which was dedicated on building the new data visualizations and the new user experience. So they were working a lot with Michael, but also we had to align with them. And all these teams had their own constraints, their own vision. And we had, of course, to discuss a lot with them, align with them, and negotiate the scope because of all this. So that was a tough exercise. And as usual, we learned some lessons. I think here what we learned was that the most important thing that we learned is you have to be prepared to find alternatives very quickly, because the scope will change many times. And finding alternatives quickly means being very early in the discovery process and the specifications, having explored many different ideas and paths, And in fact, if I reflect on the first challenge that we discussed at the beginning of this presentation, which was the long takeoff, I said that it was a good opportunity to use this time to discover, to explore lots of different paths, lots of alternatives. We've done a trillion of mockups with Michael at that moment. And although at that moment it seemed a bit frustrating because there was no output, much later it revealed to be super useful. Because when we had to negotiate the scope and the team was really coding, and they had to know what to do for the next sprint, and you had to decide very quickly and to be able to switch to find alternatives, fallbacks in terms of many different screens, capability, dashboards, and so on and so forth. Because of all the work we had done ahead, we were able to react very quickly and to fall back on different solutions. And that turned out to be super helpful. So one more, manage stakeholders. I think it's a bit like the one before. I'm sure it's something that most of you are doing almost on a daily basis. And once again, I wanted to insist on this one in this specific scenario of the transition to SaaS, because that was more difficult than what I've known before at Nexthink and in other companies where we were not in that transition situation. Because here, once again, we had new teams. They were working on new technologies. There were a lot of uncertainty. At the beginning, it was very difficult to be predictable. And very often, the management, the customers, the marketing organizations, everyone wants to know dates or at least estimations. And it was very, very difficult to answer to them. And in fact, we had a high risk of not delivering on what we were promising in case we were trying to give any estimations. Of course, things improved a lot through time, but at the beginning, that was really the case. So once again, we learned some lessons here. Something which might seem obvious, but sometimes it's not. Take some buffer. So if the engineers tell you it's going to take 2 months, maybe to your management, you say 3 months, and to the customer, you say 4 months, or you just talk in quarters. And that's very important and can save you from some difficult situations. And something which, once again, might seem obvious, but you don't always think about it when you're inside the situation and people are asking you and putting some pressure. Take the time to explain the context and challenges. Of course, some people won't care. Maybe sometimes the customer will say, "I'm paying. I don't mind why you're late or what's happening behind the scenes." But very often, we're all human beings. People can be empathetic. So if you explain to them that this is this cloud transition, that we are doing more than just building one new feature, one new product, but we're laying the foundations for the whole new platform, and that they will benefit from a lot of new features also in the future, and that's why sometimes it can take a bit more time and it's really important, and so on and so forth. Then people can understand, and at least maybe it doesn't mean that you will deliver faster, but at least they're a bit empathetic. And they can be more forgiveful. And for this one, I put I think it's the last of the 4 Nexthink core values, which is we are positive. Because in this difficult situation, sometimes you have pressure from management, from customers. It's difficult to manage deadlines. And you have to stay positive, you have to stay calm, you have to explain, educate people about how it's going, where we're heading, what's the vision, why it's taking time, and so on and so forth. And remaining positive is very important, I think, first for you to continue to enjoy work, but also people will feel it when you discuss, when you share, when you explain, and they will better accept the situation. So the last one, and here we have only one slide, so it's both the challenge and the lesson learned. CloudOps is your best friend. So if you're starting to build a product on a cloud platform as software as a service, there's probably a team somewhere which might be called CloudOps or something similar, managing the cloud operations. And if, like us, you come from an on-prem world, this team probably didn't exist before. And I think it's important that you start talking to them and interact with them very early, because they're the people who will make your product available to your customers. And you can build the best product ever. If you cannot make it available for your customers to use, it's completely useless. So it's important that you discuss with them, you understand what they do, what are their constraints, how they work, what is their plan, what is your plan, what is your vision, so that they can also adapt and build their plan around yours and make sure that they will be able to deliver your product and make it available. A small anecdote here. I think for me, it was a lesson that I learned a bit late because I discovered, in fact, quite late before delivering the product as a technical preview or as a beta, that only a few data centers, a few regions were going to be available at the beginning. And most of the customers that I had discussed with who wanted to be part of this technical preview were not in these regions which were going to be available. So a bit at the last minute, I had to run and find many other customers. And I wish I had talked to the cloud operation teams earlier to understand this. So here's a good lesson learned. And now it's time for takeaways. To recap a bit what we said. So take the time to discover, prepare several plans and alternatives, rely on your engineering counterparts to manage the technical dependencies, think bigger than your product. You're laying the foundations for the future of the cloud product and the cloud platform. Manage stakeholders, and CloudOps is your best friend. And there's the last one. We put a special slide just for this one, because we didn't really mention it, but maybe you guessed it. So why we're three of us today to present this webinar. So why we have Vlad, Mikael, and myself. It's because we wanted really to highlight how important it is to work together for the product manager, the product designer, and the tech lead. It's really, really key. Probably you've read a ton of stuff about this already. And I mean, it's not just theory. In practice, I don't see how you can succeed without doing it. Or if you succeed, it would be very, very painful. And maybe you will be, you won't want to build any other product after. So it's very, very important that you get them together, that you discuss, you collaborate. Sometimes you argue, but you also, very transparent. You share, and maybe you go and have drinks together, but super important. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult to do it. So that's the end of the slides. But before switching to Q&A, we prepared a small kind of internal panel where the three of us are going to tell you an anecdote of something that we've lived when we built this product, and which reflects, some of the things that we've talked about during this presentation. And I leave it to Vlad to start with.
Thank you, Guillaume. Well, before I begin, I just wanted to mention that I fully endorse what you just said. I think working together and working well together was key to be able to get the product out. So related to that, I think you kind of realized until now that the road that we took was a bit arduous, and it wasn't linear at all. You have forks in the road, and then when you come to a fork in the road, you need to understand who decides when, and you need to take a decision pretty fast. And there were multiple occasions like that where Guillaume and I actually need to come together, assess the situation and decide. But there was a particular one where we actually had our good DM-PM relationship tested. So we were faced with choosing between two different features, each with their own risks and limitations from just an engineering side, and each with their usefulness and upsell potential on the product side. And as you can imagine, we each thought we should take a different approach, different path. And there, the only way we managed to get out of the situation was to use all of the tools that we had built upon until then, So we needed to leverage the trust that we had built between them. So Guillaume on my engineering expertise, and I on his product knowledge, and all of the interactions that he took, and all of the work that he took.
Okay, good, very good.
Okay. Maybe we can mute my hand. Thank you. And the next part was just leverage the experience that we both had. And in doing that, we were very verbose. We engaged in a lot of communications, and I think it's true for both of us. We allowed ourselves to be challenged, and we listened to our counterpart, and that made it so that there weren't gaps in our understanding of each other's point. And finally, we used some specific frameworks, and we actually tried to understand what was the scope, what was the risk, and what was the effort of what we were both proposing. So to come back to what I was saying before, knowing who decides on what and when is like really key. And in this particular situation, I defer to Guillaume. And you have it on recording, Guillaume. I think it turned out to be the good choice. So that's my anecdote there.
Thanks, Vlad. And I agree that was a tough one. That was probably the only time where we really were each convinced to take a different path, and we didn't manage to convince each other. And we had to come to the management and try to defend ourselves. And yeah, for me, it was so tough, to defend this, knowing that you wanted to take the other path, that I think the first time in my career, I asked some of my friends working in other tech companies their opinion about it. So okay, I'll tell mine, and we have maybe the best for the end, Michael. But first, so for me, it's when I started working on this new product, at the very beginning of this transition to SaaS. So Vlad was not there yet. And in the engineering team, there was not really a kind of official tech lead, or someone, who had very deep technical knowledge and some kind of official role to be able to go and talk to management and represent the team. And the consequence was that the management, basically, they were asking me lots of questions that were usually required some technical answers, and for which I could not answer. Basically, so it was the beginning, we had this long takeoff, and they were always like, well, why does it take so long? Why are we doing this? Why are we not doing that? When are we going to be able to deliver the first piece, and so on and so forth? And yeah, that was very difficult for me. So it put lots of pressure on my shoulders, and I was doing back and forth with the team. Of course, the team was there to help and support, but it's always this, you gather some pieces of information, you come back, you try to answer the management, and they have another question, and you have to come back, and it's it's very painful. And then Vlad joined the company and the team. I explained this to him, and he stepped up very quickly. He told me, okay, next time, if you know in advance you're going to have one of these conversations, just invite me. And if you don't know, you just ping me, just call me, anything, and I'll try to join. And that's what we did. And it turned out to be super efficient, and it solved the issue very quickly, because Vlad was able to explain very precisely, why we were in this or that situation, why sometimes it was slower than expected. And he had all the details about the architecture and the dependencies on other teams. And he gained the trust of the management very quickly, because he had all this knowledge, and he was able also to explain it summarize it well in simple words, and for me that was a game changer. Then I could had less pressure. I could spend more time also on the product side, the vision, and we ended up now, I think, in most meetings with management, we are there, the both of us, and I think it's something also which spread out a bit in other teams at Nexthink, where the tech lead and the engineering manager is kind of now joining the product manager for big meetings or discussions with management, which is something which was maybe less frequent before. And that was my anecdote. And now the last Michael. And maybe as a warning, Vlad and I don't know what Michael is going to say because he wanted to keep the surprise.
Yeah, I think that anecdotes are better when it's a surprise. So let me just give a little context here. As Guillaume said, when he started this project, he was on his own and he was doing a lot of things. And he was even designing his own screens with Balsamic on his side. And he just had a little help from a part-time designer at the same time. And when I arrived on the project, I made a huge mistake, and now it's time to apologize. I designed too many screens too fast, and because of me, Guillaume became addicted to mockups. So I remember when I started, we needed short-term screens, mainly for engineers, developers, but we also needed vision screens for sales guys, manager, etc. So that's fair enough, I would say. But in the middle, we got lost, and we started creating tons and tons and tons of mockup, what I call now trash screen, because actually we never use those ones. And doing this, it was super time consuming for me, and Guillaume became more and more addicted, requesting for a screen A, screen B, now a combination of the two. And can you include this idea, just dream of that night? So it was not so cool for me, super time consuming. So at some points we had to stop. So I brought Guillaume to rehab, and don't worry, it's fine now. And we had to find another pace of work. So we decided together that for short-term screen, we will split those by releases, and a couple of sprints before the releases, those screens are frozen. So it was already a good point. And then for the long-term vision screen, we noticed that showing stuff that are too far in the future that will never happen actually are not so useful and sometimes can deserve the project. So we had a bunch of low fidelity screens on site. We can iterate fast on those ones, but let's say we limit those screens to 1 year period. So we don't have to project ourselves into like 5 years. And doing this, it means less mockup for me, more time to think, and a clearer vision. And that was my anecdote. I had a background from South Park, especially for you, Guillaume. Drugs are bad. You were addicted, and you know that.
I don't think only Guillaume was addicted to those, to be honest.
Yeah, it's your mistake, Michael, because you were too good doing great mockups too fast. Don't blame me. So with this, I think we are done. Thanks, everyone. And I think it's time for questions.
Thank you so much, guys. This is hilarious. I really liked how you built in your anecdotes. And this really shows that there were some tensions on the way. There will be always tensions on the way, but you found a way to do that. I'm just curious before we go into the questions and answers, and I think because we are not so many people, maybe we can just go, instead of writing in the chat, whoever has a question can unmute themselves and then just ask the question. But before we go there, I have one question regarding, so what is the team setup? Like, are you all reporting to the same person? What is the organizational setup, like chief technology officer, all the three of us, or how does it look like?
I'd say it's quite classic, like by the book Empowered Team. So for those of you who read Marty Kagan and the Silicon Valley Product Group, so it's a cross-functional team where we have software engineers, backend, frontend, full stack, quality assurance, and they report to the engineering manager. So in that case, Vlad. Michael reports to the head of design, or the UX officer, and I report to the product management. So in that case, the chief product officer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we already have Ivana. Do you want to unmute yourself and take the first question?
Okay, yes. So given that, so thanks for the awesome presentation. And given that, okay, this is a new field and everybody's currently transitioning to a SaaS product, what makes a PM ready to tackle such a challenge? Guillaume, how did you prepare for it? What were the pre-learnings that you had to do? And well, what did you learn on the way? And in general, like how is it different than being a product manager for a traditional product?
Thanks, Ivana. So that's a very good question. Maybe I can start by the end. So how is it different? I think once you run a SaaS product, the product is really SaaS, so which is the situation we're in now. There's lots of things which are different. It's a different mindset. You're offering your product as a service. So you have different teams who have to make sure that the product is available, is performant, is working in the different regions. But there's also new things which open from a product perspective. So for instance, cloud intelligence. So we host the data of all our customers now. And in an anonymized way, we can, for instance, query them and use some of them to be able to provide some level of intelligence and insights to all our customers. So that's one of the difference, I would say. And how to prepare. It's difficult. So in that case, there's lots of things that I learned on the job. Besides this, I would say try to discuss with people who are working with SaaS products. Try to always see the things happening in the organization, especially on the engineering side, the new teams being formed, like the cloud operations, maybe the SRE engineers, the DevOps teams, all those things which maybe they didn't exist before. Try to understand why they're here, what they're doing, because probably they have a role to play in this transition to SaaS. And if they have a role to play, it's important that you understand it because it can have an impact on the product.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Marcia, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. The company I'm in is also in a similar situation. So we're undergoing a transition to SaaS and also have some growth. And the product I manage consists of several services, and each service has its own team. And we struggle with a challenge, actually, that all those services do not integrate as seamless as they should be to get the best user experience. So we always face the challenge that, well, the place where these services should somehow integrate is, well, it's from a technical perspective, it's clear how to do that, but from a user experience perspective, we always struggle with a experience that feels like as if it's made from one piece. And I would ask you if you have some insights, whether you had the same challenge and how you tackled it.
Thank you. Michael, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So yes, we have the same challenge. So mainly because we are now many designers and we have to be more or less aligned on what we are doing. And for that, so we are counting on our head of design, of course, who is accountable for our design system. And that's why us as designer, we are working more in low fidelity. And when we have to create the, let's say, high fidelity screen, we have to go through this design system, and to create new components, we have to ask our head of design to include this in the library before. So doing this, it ensures some consistency across the pages, but only design consistency. And sometimes we have to think a bit more of just pure visual. And for this, we also have to align among designers, and we have weekly design critiques, just to show to the other designer what we are currently working on, and share ideas, thoughts, and doubts as well. That's only for the design part. I don't know if you have like a technical or product answer, Guillaume, Vlad.
Well, I think from product side, it's quite difficult. It's really linked to UX, and I think there's no magic. At some point, you're in a transition. Part of the product has an architecture, another part has a very different one, and there might be something which cannot completely fit together. It's also our case, or it's been our case. So you have to find the best compromise to make sure that the UX stays smooth, that it's still usable when you use the old part of the product and the new part. and prepare for the time when everything will be on the completely new. I don't know, Vlad, if you have something to add also.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Just wanted to say that on top of what you guys said, we also had some limitations when it came to the technology to be able to seamlessly integrate the product. And we can already think of like 2 products that we both are already working on, Guillaume, right? So I guess one of the things that could help is that all of the services that your platform is dependent on actually use like a bit of the same features or like leverage the same type of data and have like some commonality between them, and this is going to help with integration. So for example, if you have a separate I don't know, filtering system for one of your features that is not available in the platform and it's not shared anyone else, it's going to be difficult for another feature team, another product, to be able to integrate it and have like a seamless transition. So this is a bit what I mean on the technical side, like leverage as many common pieces as possible. Yeah.
More questions?
Thank you.
We still have a few minutes for further questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm Cesar. I was giving time for other people to be able to make this question because I guess it's more curiosity about something you mentioned. I'm deeply passionate about how product trios work, and you mentioned Martin Kagan and the way empowered teams work. I have to confess that in my career I've seen maybe a couple of companies actually doing that, and maybe not fully. So I'm extremely curious, how far did you go? I mean, of course, Martin is not prescribing anything, but it is asking a lot from product trios and especially from the product manager. So I'm curious if for example, how did you define that you guys were going to do this transition to software as a service? Was this the product manager decision or someone from product management pushing for it, or was this like a top-down strategic decision? And then are you really empowered teams or feature teams? That's, I guess, my question. I know it's a big one to unpack, but I want to throw it out there.
Yeah, thanks, Cesar. So I think it's definitely a big question, and there's no yes or no answer. I think we're trying to be empowered team as much as possible, but it always has its limits, and I think it's normal because we're not a startup anymore. The company has a strategy. We have investors. We have a long-term and a mid-term strategy, and some of the things I think probably it's inevitable. I don't know, maybe it's a big word, but some of the things will always be top-down. And it's normal. It's also expected. At our level, we are not the ones who should define. We can help and give inputs, but we cannot define the whole company strategy. We're just one team. So we would expect the management to come up with some vision, direction, strategy to take some of the biggest decisions. So deciding that the whole company, the whole product is going to switch to SaaS is not something that we decided at our level with Vlad and Michael. But then we were given this, this responsibility, this task to build this product, which was solving a specific customer pain point. And here we had lots of freedom. And of course, it's always controlled freedom. We have regular checkpoints with management, especially the chief product officer, about, are we going in the right direction? Or sometimes when we have, for instance, like this very difficult decision we had to take that Vlad explained, we presented both options to the CPO, and he helped us decide in the end. So I would say it's a long road. When we started, it was not like you're empowered now, okay, that works. But I would say 2 years later, I think when I read Martin Kagan, I think that we're quite close to what he describes. And probably, different teams in Nexthink maybe are a bit less. It takes time. And also, I think you have to prove that you have the capability to be empowered, that you know your topic, that you you can be a bit predictable and successful. And the more you prove it, the more trust you gain, and the more empowered you will be.
Thank you for that. I think it's a great answer. You said something that is actually really great. Like, they throw you a challenge or a problem, and you can have a lot of freedom to try and tackle it the best way possible. But you're not the ultimate decision person. Obviously, you always need to negotiate, and that's exactly what the product manager is. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cesar.
More questions? In this case, I'd like to thank all of you for having joined us today. And it was very, very interesting. And I also very much appreciated the questions, especially Cesar, that you called out this, this big topic, which there is no very clear answer in general, like everyone thinks maybe differently. But we all agree that it's just, you cannot force your decision onto the other teams, and it all has to be kind of a consensus as well. But it's been really interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. If you want to leave feedback to the speakers on the content on the PMF Connect, this is the link to fill out. And then we already have the next session planned, which will be in March. And then we'll be on the topic of navigating through the customer feedback chaos. And just a last call for Nexthink. They're hiring for a lot of positions, not just product managers, but I've noticed that they're hiring for engineering positions as well. So just reach out to the guys, and then you will find a follow-up email with the recording of the webinar and the slides after this. So then you can reach out to the team and have a discussion about your future. So thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.